2021. I just want to make a shout out to our main organizers and partners one more time. We appreciate their help very much. We couldn't do it without them. So it's the Lithuanian Ministry of the Economy and Innovation, Lithuanian Ministry of Finance, the Lithuanian Agency for Science, Innovation and Technology, as well as our valued partners, Senseria, Ondato, Rocket, Fintech Lithuania, and Fintech Hub Lithuania. Thank you very much for your help. We appreciate it very much. Let's see what's next. Our next panel today here at FinTech In, we're looking at digital transformation, the next era of FinTech. So we're going to be looking at what digital transformation is, how digital transformation is affecting different sorts of financial institutions like banks, how are they different to insurance companies. We're going to look at how it's affecting fintechs and the fintech startups. How are they getting in the middle of this process? We're going to look at open banking and the importance of sustainable finance, which is very big these days. Our moderator for this panel is Mr. Yaroslav Sarwa, and he is an experienced fintech business technology expert, and he helps companies with digitization and the digital transformation process. How are you today, Yaroslav?
Hi, how are you? Thank you. I'm very good.
Good, doing well. Okay, are you looking forward to today's panel?
Yes, very much. Cannot wait to join the panel and meet with my panelists and say hello to the audience.
Okay, very nice. Let's do it. Let's start the panel then.
Welcome to the panel discussion, Digital Transformation, the Next Era of FinTech. My name is Yaroslav Sarwa, and I will be moderating this panel for you. Today, we have a great panelists who agreed to participate. They are all very experienced professionals in the FinTech space. So let me introduce the panelists first. Jennifer Reynolds, the President and CEO at the Toronto Finance International. Jennifer also holds other positions, including being a director on the board of Citibank Canada. Jennifer has more than 20 years of experience in the financial services industry, and she's joining us from Toronto, Canada. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
The next panelist is Liudas Kanapinis, co-founder and CEO at Ondato. Liudas is also a serial entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in the financial industry. Our another panelist is Siri Borshum. Siri is a global VP of Finance, Vertical Eco-Development and Partnerships at Huawei Consumer Business Group, a very long title. Siri possesses a vast experience working in the Norwegian market with global national organizations. She also has a deep understanding of the digital transformation challenges business they're facing today. And our another panelist is Anton Zuyev, Head of Business Development and Sales at Forbis, also very experienced professional from the financial services. And last but not least, a warm welcome to the audience. Thank you for joining our panel today. Hope you will find it very interesting. So as I mentioned earlier, we will be discussing the digital transformation in the financial sector. What we are observing now on the financial markets is the rapid acceleration of digital transformation across the organizations, which is changing a financial services landscape. So I would like to kick off our discussion by bringing up the topic of the transformation in financial organizations like banks and insurance companies, because what we can hear very often is that banks must define the roles they want to play in the digital business ecosystem and seize the new opportunities, and also that banking is changing faster than most banks. I would like to ask you, Jennifer, about your point of view on this topic.
Great. Yeah, I think in terms of the digital transformation, what we're seeing is a rapid acceleration as a result of the pandemic, ironically. I think we're seeing banks and large financial institutions take risks in a way they wouldn't have before because they had to. They had to change far more quickly. They had to respond to customer needs, employee needs. And so it's been interesting to watch. I think you've seen the risk tolerance go up considerably in terms of the ability to try new things and change their business and change the way they deliver things, products and services. So I think we'll only see this continue. I don't think the pace of change is going to slow down whatsoever. So, I think that everybody, consumers, sort of their preferences, how they want to interact with their institutions has changed so dramatically, so quickly, that it leaves really big institutions no choice but to change. And so I think from a fintech ecosystem perspective, that's a great thing because large institutions are going to need to dig into the fintech ecosystem to find some of these technologies and to find some of the innovation. They'll do some of it themselves, of course, but I think they're really looking to partner in even more significant ways than prior to the pandemic. So I think, if there's any silver lining to what's been happening in the world for the last 18 months, that's one of them.
Thank you for your insights. I would like to also ask the same question to Liudas, as you are a very experienced professional cooperating with a financial institution, with banks on a daily basis. What is your point of view on this situation right now with the banks?
Jennifer, thank you so much for kicking this off conversation. So, if discussing about this topic, basically, I would split in the digitization of the services and digital transformation as such, especially of the institutions, these services, basically, the going digital, serving the clients remotely. That was happening before the pandemics for sure, because that was just a push from the market. But what pandemic also showed that the processes internally doesn't work in the environment that we have today with the COVID. And that was a really big impact on the institutions basically moving online with all of the internal procedures as well, and basically then ensuring first of all the access to the management and to the systems they're using, and as well with the efficiency itself, because it just simply doesn't work in the way that it worked before. And I think that's what we should also touch on this ground, because the market itself was already evolving. We were talking about, when I was launching my company, we were talking about, everything going digital, need for access, for the customers remotely from whatever type of whatever place they are and all the stuff. And that was already obvious and that was already happening. But the internal processes wasn't still there. Everyone was just talking about making some things more efficient, or sometimes with the access from different places and to have some data put in one or other system. But that was not actually so pushed as during the COVID pandemic, and that's really happening now in a really big scale, because everyone understood where the real efficiency sits. So we will see even more of that in the nearest future.
What you're saying, Liudas, now is that there is a difference between digitization and digital transformation, yes? And out of the observation
sure.
that I'm currently... Okay. And the financial institutions like banks, insurance companies, do they digitize right now more than they do in the transformation? Because, as you mentioned, they are looking for...
So that's the point, Yaroslav. Like, again, to be very honest, and I think quite a few of us will agree on that before pandemic, lots of the processes were happening just in sake of the innovation. Everyone was looking for to innovate, but to be honest, without a bit of not knowing what they want to innovate. Just sitting some kind of innovation manager and then innovating something, when the pandemic showed the actual pain points. So that was done with a purpose, just to enable some kind of either services, either some kind of access, or just to ensure some efficient processes behind that. And that's why I'm like a bit of separating those things from my side.
Okay, I understand. And Anton, as you also cooperate with financial institutions on a daily basis, do you agree with Ludas with this separation of the digitization and transformation?
Yes, absolutely. We work with different kinds of financial institutions. So we work with incumbent large commercial banks. We also work with new challenger banks who are just received their licenses, and they are trying to operate and find their business and customer in this, post-pandemic world that we currently live in. And of course, in fintech, you have to start digital from the start, from the get-go. And with larger financial institutions, they need to adapt and adopt new technologies and new processes, how to, stay competitive, and not only stay competitive, but also to reach out to their existing customer base and provide new services in this, remote world of interactions that we currently experience. So, of course, previously, if we take very basic things like mobile applications, which were for banks considered to be a nice thing to have, or a luxury, now it is absolutely essential. Customer onboarding must be digitized, must be done remotely. The processes must be streamlined and convenient, both for the customer, ensuring good seamless customer experience, and also for the bank, making sure that they comply with the laws and regulations, and that it also improves and streamlines their internal processes on how they interact with their customer base. So absolutely, now with the pandemic, as Jennifer mentioned, that things have just accelerated to such speeds that it's pretty much adapt to survive. And digital is the only way to go forward with digital transformation. Not only digitizing current services, but also making sure that the internal process of banks, decision making, risk scoring, compliance, MLRO operations are all done in a digital way, since some people have to work remotely, some have to work in office or in a hybrid approach. So it's a very different world that we live in, and I think digital transformation is the answer to the situation.
Okay, thank you. And Siri, I would like to ask you, continuing this topic, how does the digital transformation looks from the C-level perspective? Do they see the full picture of it, and how do they approach this topic, and how do they divide this transformation versus digitalization? What are your experiences?
Well, I think first of all, it's very difficult to disagree with anything that's been said. I think what I've seen during the pandemic is the more focus on the customer needs. That you sort of, instead of being the sort of owner of the always sort of deciding on what's important for the customer. Now suddenly it's the customer needs that have taken sort of room in the boardroom, finally. I think the challenge that the incumbents have is the legacy, obviously, and their technological legacy, because they were early on board with internet banks, and we got the opportunity to do banking ourselves, but it was more sort of just moving what we had in the branch and doing it on our own. Now we're seeing through the partnerships of the fintechs, we're actually seeing innovation in the space that is a benefit for the customers. I think we see that this has now moved into the boardrooms and the C-suite. I hear them talk a lot more about the KPIs, sort of the digital KPIs than I did before. But there is still a way to go, obviously, because it's they've been used to sitting, being in sort of the having the power both within politics but also within the business. And suddenly with the consumer coming in and sort of starting to make and set the agenda, they need to look at it differently. So I would say that the pandemic has been great for the incumbents because it has actually, as was said, they woke up. And they've taken on the responsibility. I see how a lot of the Norwegian banks have actually looked at how they can help people and when they are having financial difficulties, rather than just selling them a loan. But they've actually sort of gone in and taking a huge responsibility in how we invest our money as well, and teaching us and making us a lot more capable as consumers to drive our own finances. And I think that is a huge improvement.
Yep. Thank you very much. So what I can hear you saying is that this digital transformation is about delivering these new value propositions, enhancing the agility and innovation, crafting new leadership models, and the COVID pandemic has accelerated the process, and the consumers are benefiting from this situation now, as the banks, insurance companies are like focusing more on the consumers right now. And you have also touched the very interesting topics of the fintechs and new entrants on the market, because on the other side we have fintechs, neobanks, challengers who have unleashed innovation in banking, driving rapid improvements in the quality of services delivered to the customers, increasing the competition and raising customer expectations. So I would like to ask you now a question about how do you see the cooperation between fintechs, neobanks versus the incumbents? Is this the cooperation, or is this the competition that takes place right now on the market?
Well, it's an interesting question, and the answers, I think, can lie in the sector that we could look at. For example, if we look at payments, I mean, payments are now so competitive and pretty much are owned by the fintechs, because now you can send money to any country, by making some clicks, and that's it. But in terms of other services, we see more cooperation rather than competition, and not only incumbents now have to deal with open banking and PSD2 in Europe, and have to open up their APIs and work with third-party providers, but they also take notice that instead of developing everything in-house, for example, it's better to procure new functionalities, new services, new products from market professionals. For example, like Ondato Ludas here, that they can already instantly enrich their services by employing KYC tech, which was previously out of reach for them. So I think in general, I believe there's more benefit in partnership and cooperation rather than competition. But obviously, competition is always healthy.
Well, I think we need competition, though, because we need innovation in this space. We are far from, as a customer, I mean, even though I'm sort of saying that there has been improvement, I do think that we've all sort of experienced that pain when things doesn't work with your finances. And we need, I think it's really important that we have competition to drive that innovation, because we cannot allow this to be a winner takes it all space. And we've seen, I mean, we see the big techs really sort of doing the right thing. And therefore, I think Europe has the opportunity to drive that innovation, because we can actually play together. We have done that before, and I think we need to continue to do that. And I must say that from an industry that's been sort of used to dealing on its own, like having, like, you have one big bank and then there's the other big bank, and they wouldn't talk very much amongst each other. We see a huge improvement in how the collaboration is going. But then again, I mean, it comes down to, how do you embrace that? Is it a partnership? Do you buy the company? How do you then take them in? How do you make sure that their culture is actually allowed to continue to blossom, and you don't sort of kill it? And that is a leadership challenge that is not necessarily an easy one, that we need to pay full respect to, I think, and more attention to. So I would say yes, cooperation is great, but let's do that by creating competition.
So what you're saying, Sherry, is to cooperate and compete at the same time, and that will drive the innovation forward.
Well, what I'm saying is that I think we need, in order to sort of, for us to live a sustainable life in the future, we need financial health. It is just as important as physical health,
Right.
and therefore, as we've said, like, until now, even though we've come far and a lot has happened, we still have a way to go in order to make sure that, and not everyone just having a bank account, but they're actually getting support in running their own finances. We have a challenge with the youth, not never they, or at least in the Nordics, they haven't seen cash, right? Because they tap and they get money just transferred from their parents into an account in a split second. So how do they understand the value of money, and how to look after it? And I think with all the technology available now, we can actually help with that, and we need to do that. So yeah, that's why I think competition is so important.
Okay, thank you, Siri. And Jennifer, because Siri has presented now, like, the perspective from the European market. How does it look in the North American market, in Canada, where you are based right now?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both in terms of competition and cooperation. I think at the end of the day, it's understood that we need a strong financial ecosystem for us to have a successful economy and society, of course. And so I think there is collaboration from that perspective in terms of building that strong ecosystem. And I think we've been fortunate here that we have seen good support for the fintech ecosystem, from the big incumbents, whether that's through investing in accelerators and incubators, whether that's partnerships, because I think there is a recognition that we need both. I think in our case, we're further behind on things like open banking. That there's a review going on right now, and I think we'll see that move forward in Canada and follow on as we've seen in other countries. So I think that's created, in terms of access, for the fintechs, that's obviously created some barriers. So I think we're actually going to see that competition increase in our market as a result of that. But I think it's a bit of both at the end of the day. I think that there is, I would say, more and more collaboration between big incumbents because of some of the challenges we face, not just the pandemic, but if you think about things like climate and just general sustainability, I think there's a recognition that we have to work together as financial institutions. The different parts of our economy need to work together if we're going to address things like, large challenges like the ones I just mentioned. So I think going forward, we'll continue to see a bit of both. I think a healthy financial ecosystem needs some healthy competition and some healthy collaboration as well.
Right. Jennifer, you mentioned about the importance of sustainable finance. Could you tell us a little bit more? What roles does it play in a financial services? And
Yeah, I think we certainly have seen in Canada, actually, the growth of sustainable finance has come largely from the private sector thus far, which is interesting because, in Europe, we would have seen, much more of a policy-driven, government-driven agenda there, which caused the growth. And I think that's because in Canada, there is a recognition that if we're going to have a sustainable long-term economy here, we need to make some changes, and we need to make them quickly. And not just in terms of course, in terms of meeting our climate goals and emissions. Clearly, that's a high priority for the sector. But I think we're thinking about it far more broadly when we think about sustainability. We're thinking about the E, the S, the G. In a very significant way. And there is that movement in Canada and throughout the world, I would say, from not just thinking about shareholders, but thinking about stakeholders. So thinking about your employees, thinking about your community, thinking about the long-term sustainability of your sector, of your business. So that's really an evolution in thought process. But we really are seeing a tremendous amount of capital being announced in terms of the big FIs saying we're going to drive billions of dollars literally into sustainable finance activities. So in Canada, we will have a difficult transition. We're a resource-based economy, and so for countries like ours, it's going to be a difficult task. It's going to take a lot of capital. And we need to get on it quickly. So we certainly have seen just the acceleration even over the last 18 months has been incredible. So, and interestingly, we didn't see the pandemic reduce that focus on sustainable finance and on these types of activities. If anything, it increased it, because I think there's a recognition that there's challenges that we all need to work on together. A pandemic is one, climate is one. And so we didn't lose any momentum. If anything, I would say we've gained momentum over the last 18 months or so.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask a bit further about the sustainable finance. What does it mean for the end customer? What does it mean for the customers, for the average people who are using the financial services on a daily basis? How is it impacting their lives, and how will it impact their lives in the nearest future?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see it. It starts. People always, the institutional money is the one that people focus on in the beginning, right? Because those are large amounts of dollars going towards these initiatives. I think if you think about it, though, at the customer level, we're seeing a lot more activity. People are starting to ask questions about, where is their retirement savings going? Even things like, green bank accounts. There's really growing interest that people want to make sure that, their dollars are going to not just making a return, but also to doing good in the world. And I think we're beginning to understand that doesn't necessarily have to mean that, we're making less, for instance, on our investment accounts. I think there's an understanding from the consumer that it doesn't have to come at a cost to be investing in sustainable companies. And so I think it's great that those questions are being asked. I think investment advisors all of a sudden have to be smart on these issues. They have to have answers, and they have to have products to deliver, because there is that demand there from the average investor all of a sudden. So I think we're seeing, certainly in Canada and throughout the world, we're seeing new products every day on that front. And I think we'll continue to see that. And I think, I hope we get to a place where it's not, should I invest in, these types of sustainable products or others? Hopefully we're just moving generally that's the trend, that everyone is moving towards this more sustainable investing, and to thinking about these things on a day-to-day basis.
And I mean, you also see a lot of sort of services where you can get your sort of carbon footprint, so that they look at your spending, and you are being a lot more aware of how you spend your money and what you spend it on. And that also helps the consumer's consciousness on how they what they should do with, and how they should spend their money. So I think that is also that helps us to actually have the right and understand more of our own behavior.
Okay, thank you, Siri, for those insights. And you mentioned before about this open banking, and I would like to ask you, Ludas, how do you see the open banking working right now? Whether this is the platform for the banks to collaborate with the fintechs, or this is which direction is the open banking moving right now, and what are your predictions for the nearest future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's quite a lot of discussions going on about the open banking today. And if it serves the targets that it was created for. Yeah. So and still see lots of the different APIs around and different standards, and currently we cannot say that it works as intended. But having that said, of course, here to mention that it is a good example of basically how, if to remember how the Open API was going into the market and how the traditional banks were literally against that, and how it basically transformed the view itself to the just like simply blocking the initiatives, and then going for the possibilities what it brings, and in the region we can see like basically all of the banks now working in the way that you can see the other bank accounts and all the stuff, and then the information. There's bunch of the new service providers for the payments, for initiating the payments and collecting, with really simply just pressing few buttons and confirming that in any website and all the stuff. So it gives a quite a good opportunity to a bit of, again, change of view on any initiative going, so and running. But also to a bit of reflect on what was previously said. There was mentioned quite a few very good things that I want just to stress a bit. So there were a few words that is like trend, then the market needs and the challenges. So it's all about the actually challenging the markets. And if there's no challenges around, so of course we have quite a few now happening within this period of time, but if there's no big challenges around, so then we are creating those challenges for ourselves, and then going with some kind of trends behind that. So and the open banking was also one of the outcomes of this, to be honest. It just took quite a long to launch because of the environment, and because of the lobbyism that was happening in the market. We know how difficult that was to implement and to make it happen in the market. But now it gives quite a big opportunity. I don't see a direct cooperation in this field. It's just like integrating the APIs, giving the possibilities. Of course, there's quite a few companies now integrating those APIs and giving the endpoints with the full integrations and like supporting those integrations. So of course, that kind of initiative gives quite a lot opportunities to new business models to arise. So and that's what we are seeing now, and that's what for sure we will see also in the future related to the open banking itself.
Okay. Vitas, you just mentioned about those new business models which are arising right now. Could you tell us a little bit more about those business models? What does it mean for the banks, for the incumbents, and what does it mean for the fintechs?
So like when we are thinking about the new business models in general, so we have to think about the customer first. Yeah. So, and if a bit of looking back again to the challenger banks, so what it actually means is that the traditional banking system was a bit of challenged, because before everyone was thinking that it's just enough basically to have the account itself within the trust institution, to manage that in whatever way you kind of can, and that's it. And then this traditional banking system was a bit of challenge with quite a few ideas. So first of all, that user experience matters. That the business models not per transaction, but with maybe with the free banking, and then having some kind of incomes from the advertising or the monthly installments or whatever is possible. That instant payments is important, and some kind of transfers or split payments and whatever are important for the users. And that was the initial like challenge, and that's how that part of that infrastructure basically grew up. But fast forward, it's actually those challengers became the same banks. They went for the same licenses, and now they're fully licensed institutions. So that's what we also need to understand, that it's just the cycle of the involvement of the ecosystem. Yeah, so with the new business models, when we are talking about that, is more about the challenging these existing system or the infrastructure, so that having in mind that like the transactional pricing for, I don't know, we had in Lithuania the transaction in euro that will cost 20 euros per transaction. It just will not keep for a long time, and that will be challenged at one day. And it relates with all the parts within the infrastructure. So that's what kind of business models I'm talking about.
Okay, and you mentioned also about fintechs which are becoming banks, and I remember like a couple of years ago there was a big discussion about the disruption on the market, that the fintechs will disrupt the traditional banking model. And right now we can see some fintechs are becoming banks like Revolut, N26. So can we talk about the disruption, or we talk about the cooperation, or there is something else that is evolving right now on the market
Oh,
that it's not labeled yet?
yeah. I think it's a very interesting topic and question to address. I think we're actually seeing a convergence, so to speak, that banks are very focused on becoming fintechs and focusing on technology and innovation and digital transformation, while fintechs and challengers coming from the tech environment, they are more focused on the compliance and financial part. So banks are more focused on tech, and fintechs more focused on the fin part of fintech. And yeah, that's something interesting, because when you look at challengers, they encounter reporting requirements, AML requirements, and these are very, I would say, well-established regulations, and they are complicated, not really tech-friendly. There's reports you need to provide, information you need to keep. There's certain friction points that fintechs needs to solve in order to stay fast, agile, and so on. While banks, they know all these processes, but they need to innovate in other parts. So I think it's just so to speak, two industries will probably meet somewhere in the middle, but it's definitely inevitable.
So continuing this topic.
Maybe to add on this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Maybe to add on this a bit. So basically, the description, like the term itself, comes just because of somebody doesn't believe that it is possible. So if looking what was happening before a bit, so Facebook was already there, Google was already there, and those big techs were actually creating the user behavioral principles, and where or how some IT system has to work. And like IT people like me or Anton, we think that in general, what is on the app on the web is just the IT stuff, and why the disruption came to the vocabulary as such is just because some people think that the transaction might happen just instantly, doesn't cost much and all this stuff, and that is why that was called a bit of disruption. So, and when it comes to the reality, so then it just then it transfers to the challenging, and then again to the other words, and then just shifting to the usual economy. But if looking at, in general, it's also like just a buzzword, so it's more on just getting the attention itself, and a bit of giving another type of opportunity to operate.
Okay, thank you, Ludas. And continuing this topic, I would like to ask you, Jennifer, how do you see the nearest future of the incumbents? Like, we are talking about this possible disruption, and what roles will the banks play in the nearest future? As you are very experienced in the banking sector, so give us the insights from that sector.
Well, I mean, I think the reality is, and this has been touched upon, that this is a highly regulated industry, to say the least, and that will never change. And so you are going to need sophisticated institutions who can deal with the reality of that regulation. And the regulation is there, in many regards, it's important. It creates stability in the financial sector. It creates stability in an economy. So I just don't think that's never going to go away. Having said that, they do need to change. They do need to evolve. They do need to, this concept of disruption, of change in ways they probably wouldn't have if you didn't have these more innovative fintechs sort of around coming up with these different ideas and trying to do things in different ways. The advantage for those is that they're not regulated in the same way. And so they're able to do things differently. So I think, the reality is how do you incorporate that nimbleness? How do you incorporate that transformation into businesses that, traditionally have moved slowly, that are highly regulated? Because there's so many good ideas. And often, what I hear back from big institutions is that, they've got fintechs coming with fantastic ideas, but they just don't work within the regulatory environment. They don't work at scale. So it's making those two things work together is the challenge for both sides, really. But certainly, if you think about transformation, disruption, that's the reality that you're starting from if you're a big institution. And so how do you figure that out? How do you transform within that context?
Okay, because in the traditional financial institutions, we have the legacy system, traditional structures, cultures, leadership models. And when I, for example, speak with the managers from the banks, they say that, what they say is that we understand that the digital transformation should continue, but we even know how to do it. But there are some problems with pressing this button to start to change. When we speak about this, the structure, the culture, the leadership models, what should happen, or how should they start the transformation? Or they need, more cooperation with the fintechs or more open banking that will push them towards the transformation, or it should start in the middle by themselves?
Yeah, I guess just briefly, I would say, I do think it's a bit of both. I think you have to create a culture within your organization that is focused on change, that is focused on, taking advantage of innovation and not viewing it as a scary thing that we're doing things differently tomorrow relative to what we do today, but that's something we need to do. We need to challenge ourselves. And so, I think if you think about the talent pool within financial services, those are the kinds of employees that people are looking for, people who can change, people who can be more nimble and pivot and think about things in a more creative and innovative fashion than we probably have in the past. So, I think it has to come from within, because if you don't have that culture within, you're not going to be able to take advantage of innovation inside your organization and outside your organization.
I totally agree, Jennifer. I totally agree, because I think what we see very often is that people that, if you work in the bank industry for a certain number of years, you become sort of bankanized. Like I worked at Google, you become Google, like you become like a Googler, we called ourselves, and you tend to act that way. And so what I think the industry needs to do is to hire people that are not all numbers, and come with different backgrounds, obviously. That's important. But I also think that one of the reasons for this not running fast enough is the investment level. Like we're talking about, it is high investment. And when you have a legacy system and you sort of always put things on top of each other, obviously it's not going to move fast, because it's going to become difficult. And I really sort of appreciate and understand that there's been put a lot of money into these systems already, and it feels very challenging to then say, let's build a new one. But I think, one, we need to see more investment in that, and then we also need to see more investment in innovation. We need to see the banks doing a lot more mistakes than they are today. And that's hard, because when you come from a bank is numbers, and it's financial, and it's regulatory, and you're basically taught not to do mistakes. So it's a huge sort of change of a culture. and of an environment. So those two, I would agree. Look at your talent pool, the people, and your investments. That's the most important places to start. And then, as we talked about in the beginning, to make sure that the C-suite is actually have this as their KPIs. It's part of it has to come from the top and down. Because if they're not measured on it, it won't happen. So that is also important, and you need to bring in the board. You need to make sure you have a board that is competent and have that technological knowledge that they need in order to make these decisions. And very few have, because they have people that have been working in the finance industry for many, many, many years and know that business very, very well. So keep some of them and then get new, fresh thoughts into the boardroom as well. I think is pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think, with the world moving into, digital space, there is, open banking. Also in Lithuania, if you don't know, there is this new initiative of open data involving government infrastructure, opening up its databases and providing access to, fintechs and other tech startups to make use of that data. So I think in general, it is expected of C-level executives and board members to come with an open mind and realization that things are different, that there are all legacy systems and there are legacy processes and legacy ways of doing business, but times are completely different. But I would like to say that banks are definitely not asleep at the wheel. They know what's happening, and as Jennifer mentioned, there are accelerator programs. There are, investments in fintech. There is great collaboration with fintech, and also large investment bank, commercial banks launch their digital offerings, so as a spin-off to target younger audiences. So they do know what's happening, and they are moving into digital space, and they are transforming digitally. It just, there is, as Siri mentioned, there are sticking points. There are some existing processes that act as a handbrake, and there's also a lot at stake. Risk taking for banks is a bit tough. Yeah.
Oh, obviously, but one thing that we've seen some C-suite executives doing in the Nordics is actually getting a 20-year-old mentor, which means, like, you probably heard about it, but just to get that person's view on how they do their banking and how they work on the digital, and many of them get these huge sort of experiences or aha thoughts, because they think they're very digital themselves, and they are. But when you look at how 20-year-olds maneuver in this space, like even us in this room will fall off the wagon, right? So we need those young people to tell us in what direction things are moving, even in the financial service space.
So what you're saying, Sherry, is that we should be closer to the customers and listen to the customers' needs and their expectations and adjust the services to their needs.
I think that if you ask people what they need and what they want, they wouldn't know. It's like when you ask, what do you want to watch more of on TV? Many people would say, oh, animal shows. Like, that's not what they watch. They watch reality shows. So you don't put that burden on the customer, but you use the data and the insights to actually see what the customer is doing, and then you make small changes. You don't need to make like huge changes in the beginning, but if you make those small changes, then go in and have a look and see how consumers behave. Then go back in, maybe change it a little bit more. I mean, when I worked at Google, I don't. It's a couple of years since I left, but at that time there were continuous tests on the search page, right? And they would test like 40, 50, 60 different colors on the ads to see if there was one color that customers would click on faster than the others. and we were talking milliseconds, right? But there were some colors that were more adaptive to us clicking faster, so that we would come to what we looked for faster. And I think that's what you need to. That's how you need to approach this, from the finance industry as well. Look at what your customer is doing. Look at how they're behaving. Take that data, and then develop new products and improve your services. I think basically there are three things today that will not change within the next 3 years. It is one, that the mobile phone is in our hand 24/7, and that it's kind of become a new organ for us. We don't leave it out of sight. We look at it, I don't know, is it 160, 70 times a day? Then there's all the data and the insights that we leave behind, all the clues that you can use. I think the number is that there is 95% of that data that's not being used for anything. It's just that is just there. And then there's all these technological tools that we can use, like artificial intelligence, like biometrics, like voice, that we didn't have before. These three things, if you just take those three things and use that to your advantage, I think you come a long way.
Okay, thank you, Siri. You just mentioned about the technologies, because when we speak about the digital transformation, there's no digital transformation without the innovative technologies, which are driving the rapid improvements of the quality of services delivered to the customers. So I'd like to ask you, and I'm directing this question to you, Liudas, which technologies are playing the crucial role in a digital transformation right now, and which will be the most needed technologies in the nearest future?
Yeah, so there are quite a few things already mentioned, and there's not too much to add on this, but maybe a bit of like to reflect, let's say, on what was already said. Is just, of course, I do agree with everything that was said. It's just I think that a bit of all the institutions, basically, of course, with some exceptions, but has to come back a bit to the roots of the actual mission, and vision, what they do and what they want to reach. Because I really see lots of the developments and the innovation happening just in sake of the innovation. Yeah. So first of all, if some bank wants to be the best SME lender, so they have to focus on that, and then to ensure the right technology is used to make that happen. Yeah, but not in the opposite way. But if talking about the technologies itself, so for sure, so the biometric is just happening now. It's already like even more like a hygiene thing to have, and just because of this, remote relationship and all that kind of stuff, the machine learning is for sure like the number one now, and for the next few years, because of the transactional volumes and everything. Is just impossible to manage everything other way, from the compliance to the decision making, whatever type of. So in my strong belief, like these two will be the main ones, that everything will be surrounded from that perspective. But as I say, we really don't have to focus on the technology itself. The technology just serves the targets that we want to reach and to achieve, and it will happen anyway. But there has to be a real task what we actually want to solve. So if we want to have the fully automated loan for the, I don't know, corporate, so then we know the final target. We already have all the technologies to enable that. It's even not the question. It's about just the implementation itself. If we want to serve our customers fully remotely, we can make that happen. There's all of the technologies around there, ensuring the meeting the regulatory requirements, and of course the fraud prevention and everything. But we have to be sure that then we are the digital bank, but not the bank, the traditional one, serving and sending the cards and the invitations by mail. And that's what needs to be solved also, like internally within the institution.
Anton, can I ask you the same question? Do you agree with Ludas when it comes to these technologies and how should they be used in the future?
Yes, absolutely. Innovation for the sake of innovation is not really helping anybody or solving any real life problems. I think focusing on the issue and actually listening to your consumers, because consumers now and people in general, they have a voice and they're speaking very good ideas. They voicing their opinion and what they want. I think just listening to what your customers and general public wants, even coming back to this idea of sustainable finance, this all came from the bottom up. I mean, from the consumers, and I think you have to take into account what the market wants, what your consumers want, and just addressing that need, and and then the technology will come along. But first you have to understand what is the problem at hand, and then the solution will follow. But of course, in terms of what innovations are important, machine learning, artificial intelligence, increased use of biometrics, opening up of data, analytics of that data. I think that is the key and the future for digital transformation.
Okay. Thank you, Anton. You mentioned about listening to the customer's needs and adjusting the offer to the customer. And still, I would like to ask you, do you think that we are moving fast enough with the digital transformation right now, especially when you take into consideration the COVID, the pandemic situation? Are we meeting the client's needs, or we are behind the client's needs and we should move forward with the transformation right now?
Well, obviously to move forward, no doubt about that. But I do think that we have. I mean, we who work in this industry thinks that it's not moving fast enough. But I think the consumers are happy with the. They're happy. Many of them are happy that it's not moving faster because they need to be able to get on board. And again, back to financial health. I mean, you have like the young generation on one side, but then you also have the older generation who not necessarily are comfortable with all these technological devices and ways of doing things. So we need to make sure that we bring them along on the journey as well. But what I do think is that back to what I think is the most important thing is the consumer, the customer. Just make sure that you're part of the development and that you push the development further by trying new things. Not necessarily for everyone, but for a certain part of your customer segment, for example. So I would say that yes, for my own sake, I wish this was moving faster, but that's me personally. I think that what we're seeing is that the industry is going, is moving in the right direction. We're seeing these corporations that we've been talking about, and they are crucial for improving the products and the services that we're looking for. But I would challenge the industry on taking a few more risks, but and then kill them faster if they don't work. I think that's one of the challenges that we see, that when you've kind of made that business case and everyone's on board, you do it until it kind of drops and fails big time, rather than seeing what you see. Very often you can see whether this is going in the right direction or not. And just to kill your darlings is hard, but I think we need to, as an industry, become better at that and just say, no, it didn't work. Just get rid of it. What did we learn from it? Take what we learned and then move on. Because sometimes, even though we think it is a good idea, the customers might not want it. Don't put hundreds of millions of dollars behind it in marketing campaigns and stuff to try to force it on the consumer. Because if it's convenient and if it works for you, you will use it. So I think that with great products comes consumers. That's just how it's been. Many companies have been built up these days. Like look at the big techs. That's a customer, it's been a great product and the customers have come to them. So the industry can think a little bit more like that, maybe.
Okay, so I think that we are coming to the end of our panel, and I would like to ask you the last questions. They're very general, but maybe a tricky one. What are your predictions for the nearest future? How will the digital transformation evolve in the financial sector? How will it impact the life of the clients, the customers, but also of the people involved in the financial industry? I would like to start with Anton this time.
Well, okay. I think I will answer it from answering it from my perspective, coming from the core banking industry.
Yes.
We can definitely see that the way of developing systems in-house and hoarding infrastructure on premises is just the way of the past. Fintechs, they work very fast. They're very mobile. The consumer is very fast and mobile and agile. So fintechs, they outsource a lot of functions. They work in the cloud. They are very fast to roll out new products. They are open-minded to new ideas and new products and functionality. So if something doesn't work, they focus on things that do work. And I think with banks, with the financial industry, with the incumbents, they have to adopt the same mindset that you have to take a little bit of risk, but you have to develop and trust new trends and follow trends and deliver the solutions that the customers need. So I think moving into cloud, I think that's no longer surprising to anyone right now. I think it's just collaboration with fintech and focus on innovation and general adoption of this new mindset in the digital world. I think that is the trend, that all banks will be eventually digital, but I can't speak for the timeline here.
I think so. Collaboration instead of disruption. And Liudas, your insights about the perspective?
I agree with Anton. So basically, we just have to understand that the shift and the change just is happening, and it's even not the matter if it will happen. It's just the question of when it will happen. And that was already also mentioned during our conversation, so maybe we can a bit of stress that. But the main now task for everyone that still has the legacy systems, so to get rid of that. So either to use solutions like Anton is building, either to do different ones, doesn't matter, but just to get rid of the legacy systems, to be able then to quickly shift to whatever type of changing environment is coming, because nobody knows actually what will be important and where we will have to change. So now to prepare for that change is the really, really important task for everyone. And that's where it is coming. And then what's already was said and was Jennifer and Siri mentioned, that actually, the still the mentality wise is that and it's the problem of all the big corporates and big incumbent banks. It's the same with the governments, to be honest, with it just being afraid of failure. So where we still have to learn, especially from the big tech companies and the startup companies, that the failure is just the lesson learned, and then we can just act quickly and move forward quickly. But of course, that is just impossible if we have the legacy systems behind, because that's why all this regulatory change, and basically then the push from the risk perspective is just too big, because the change there is just impossible, and that's what needs to be challenged within all the sector in general. Because if we will put that on the right systems, to be able to reflect quickly to the any change that is happening, so then it will give us the opportunity to try out the things quickly, to fail quickly, and again to move forward with the decisions. So So that's my view and on what needs to be done next and what will happen next anyway.
Thank you, Lidas. I like it when you said that just to get rid of this legacy systems and to move forward. I mean, you're like describing that the perfect world in a financial sector is. And
No,
Siri,
but it's a matter of time, Yaroslav. It's
yes, yes, of
and
course.
everyone understands already that it just has to be done. I do understand that it sounds like a perfect world, but that's the thing of like why the sector was challenged, and that's why everyone was talking about this like threat of challenging the industry itself.
Okay, thank you, Lidas. And Siri, do you agree with what Lidas just said about getting rid of the systems and moving forward quickly?
Well, I think that every legacy bank would want to get rid of their not legacy banks, but all the banks would want to get rid of their legacy systems. Sorry, but as a consumer, I think if you ask, like the question you asked is what can we see in the future, I think that if I want to challenge the industry, I want payments to disappear. I want everything to be embedded. I want see corporations with retail industry and many other industries and see how can finances go away. I would like to challenge the industry on voice because basically it's a lot easier for us to talk than it is to type. And I think we have the opportunity to move in that direction. So I would love to see something that makes that easier for me. And then obviously the usage of machine learning or sort of the term artificial intelligence to improve the services that are there today to fit me and my needs more than they are, and help me with my finances so that I become financially healthy. That would be for me the ultimate future.
Okay. Thank you for your insights, for your comments, and I would like to thank you for sharing your insights today, and also big thanks for all the participants for being with us during the panel. Hope you enjoyed it a lot. Hope to see you soon in the nearest future. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for a very interesting panel session. Yaroslav, I'm interested in some of your follow-up thoughts from this panel session. What about the idea that small fintechs will become banks eventually? Is it inevitable that every fintech has to become a bank?
What we can observe right now is that, like a couple of years ago, almost every single fintech had a goal to become a bank, to become a financial institution at the very end, and some of them managed to do this. But what can you observe right now is this totally different approach. I mean, the fintechs are more looking for the cooperation with the incumbents or with the big tech, with the big institutions, instead of becoming a banks. So right now it's more shifting towards the cooperation and the fintechs providing technology solutions, innovative technology that could be applied across the big financial organizations like banks or insurance companies.
Okay, that makes sense, how the market is moving, which leads me to my next thought about the idea of disruptions. And one of the panelists brought up the idea that this disruption we always hear in fintech, that it's really just a buzzword and maybe a past buzzword, that the disruptions the banks want these new innovations these days, and it's no longer disruptions, maybe original OG transfer-wise sort of thing very long time ago. What's your thought on the idea that are there still big disruptions to be made to traditional banking?
When I think about the disruption, I mean, it was a buzzword, and it still is a buzzword. So, but at the very beginning, when the people started to talk about the disruption, there was a moment of a fear across the financial organization, like, wow, we're gonna be disrupted sooner or later. Yes, we have to do something. We have to change. We have to adapt very quickly. And the time was moving forward, and there was no disruption. It was more like adjusting to the situation and looking for some strategies to transform digitally. So right now it's more about making a small steps forward and transforming step by step instead of disrupting at once with all the aspects of the business. So disruption is a buzzword, and it will be a buzzword as a catchy word. It's like OpenAI word, but still it's more about small steps, more about the collaboration. It's about moving forward in the right pace instead of disrupting at the moment.
Okay, sounds like some reality has been setting in, a little bit of even maturity into the fintech startup market.
Yes.
Okay, very good. That's all we have
Exactly.
time for with our wrap-up questions. Thank you, sir, for your moderation and for a very interesting panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting me on the conference.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. So that was our panel
Thank
on
you.
digital transformation. We hope you enjoyed that one, and we're going to see you on the next talk soon.